All right, so I read chapter 7 of the book Friday Night Lights. Of course, it's about the school Permian in Odessa, Texas, and it's about the '88 team they had that won the state title, I believe. It's what the movie was made about. Um, so that chapter number 7 was called School Days, and basically it starts out by talking about how they used to have these pep rallies on Friday mornings. So they had their football pep rallies Friday before school started. It talked about, the band was there and there was parents there. There was kids dressed up, little kids there, dressed up like Permian football players. And it was just really a big deal. The band was huge, 200, probably 150, 200 people in the band. They would honor the football team there. They'd have a skit, and it was just like a really big deal. It talked about how the football players had a hard time concentrating the rest of the day after the pep rally um, for the game that night. But it also talked a lot about how football ruled Odessa Permian High School. Academics was kind of secondary. It was well known that the football team was the focus. Winning football games was the focus. And it talked about a lot of the teachers there. They gave comments in the book where the teachers would talk about how they knew that academics wasn't really the forefront, and they had a hard time getting kids to do really push themselves when it came to academics. Um, they said that some of the teachers that were really experienced, that had been there for a while, could tell, like over the course of 10 or 20 years, like from the 60s to the 80s, how the academics had declined at Permian. So that was what a big story was about. It was about, they talked about the Pepettes, the girls, how the next biggest thing to being a football player at Permian High School was being a cheerleader or a Pepette. You had like a status there if you were involved with the football team. It talked about how the girls at the school or in the community weren't really pushed to be intelligent as far as academics. They were really pushed to be like more cheerleaders and that type of thing, or be pretty, be their looks, that type of thing. Yeah, they weren't really the girls weren't really pushed. It talked about a football player named Don Billingsley. He was one of the star players there. It talked about how Billingsley really didn't do a lot of work, but he was a star. But that was okay there at Permian, because football was king, right? Also, they talked about how all the girls seemed to like him, and he knew it, but I guess he wasn't dating anybody because he didn't want that to get in the way of his football. Talked about Bridget Van Deventer. She was the top cheerleader at the school. She also was a homecoming queen, and she had talked about how she loved that because it gave her a lot of status at the school. Talked about Brian Chavez. He was very great athletically, but he was also good academically. Okay, he was one of the star football players on the team, a linebacker or something like that. It talked about a teacher named LaRue Moore, who was a teacher who I believe helped Brian Chavez, encouraged him to be a great student as well as a great football player. The end of the chapter talked about Booby. It talked about how Booby was in class and he didn't really have to do any work. Talked about it mentioned that he was a special ed student and that he was taking classes, like for example he was in an algebra class and he didn't have to he was in algebra in 12th grade, which most people took in 9th grade, and he was struggling with it. Didn't really do a lot of work in his classes. And it also quoted a city council or a school board member. Her name was Vicky Gomez, and she said that she really talked about how they wish they could get the football players to do more work, but she realized that the way it was in Odessa at that time, she said God, country, and mojo football are the three things that were really important in Odessa at Permian High School. So they had also talked about a new superintendent they had got, and how the superintendent, although he was told about how successful the football team was and that needs to continue, he was on a mission to help improve the academics there. So that's kind of what chapter 7 was about. It was called School Days. Let me know what you think. Peace.